Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On the show, we interview other writers and we talk about mental health from their personal journeys. If you have not already hit that like and subscribe button, go ahead, do that now so that you never miss an episode. Today with us, we have Katie Marie. Hello, how are you?
Hello. I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Where are you visiting us from?
I am visiting you today from sunny Norfolk in the lovely United Kingdom.
Oh, okay, very nice. So what time is it there for you?
It is 3:30 in the afternoon today.
Okay.
I say
A
today like
kitty.
it's not. Yes, sorry, they're
No, never be sorry about a kitty.
around a fair bit.
Yes, I have to lock mine out, or else they are not only walking across, they're like bumping into things. One time they actually turned the whole thing off.
Oh no.
Yeah, they think
See,
they're the
I
boss.
tried locking mine out, but they sit at the office door and scream the place down. They're actually less disruptive if I just let them walk across the desk every now and again.
Oh, that's
Plus, I'm
funny.
armed with dreamies, so I can always distraction.
Oh, see that? I didn't try that. But mine,
Con him, man.
I think only two of them would have went for it, and the other two'd be like, "No, I want to keep bugging you."
That's just typical.
It is. It really is. So tell us, who is Katie Marie?
Well, there's a loaded question. So I am, as you've said, Katie Marie. I am a horror enthusiast and writer. I pay my bills by working for the health service over here, the NHS. I work in a quality team up in North Norfolk. I'm also extremely passionate about disabilities and disability representation in particular, and even more in particular, disability representation in the horror genre.
Oh, I love horror.
Oh, hell yeah, who doesn't love horror?
My husband.
Oh no.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how I ended up with somebody who absolutely hates horror. Because I love it. That's
Yes,
how I
yeah.
got started reading was horror.
Yes, yeah, I blame my mum for mine. She used to read me bedtime stories, as some parents are wont to do. Although, whereas a lot of parents were reading Harry Potter, etc. Although I don't think that was out when I was that young. Dear God, oh, I'm so old. Anyway, most parents would read something of that age group. My mum decided to pick up Clive Barker and read that to me when I was quite small. And in particular, she read The Thief of Always, and that is where I credit my love of horror coming from in the first instance.
Love it. Yeah, no, mine was actually from a horror movie to start with. And
Ooh.
it's shockingly, it was not my mom because my mom loves all things horror. But it was my dad. I was with him for the weekend. We always picked out movies. My brother picked out Chucky. I was I don't even know how young, like really, really little, like should not have been watching this movie little. Loved it, of course, but my mom yelled at my dad so much. Why would you let them watch that movie? Blah, 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 blah. But I mean, then I was into it all and I loved all things horror. So
There you go. He started a lifelong obsession.
pretty much, yeah, yeah. So let's get into it. So I could talk about horror all day, but let's get into it.
I often do.
Right? It's just so entertaining. It's so
it's it's so varied as well. It's so wide. I mean, I know whenever I bump into somebody and they say, "Oh, I like horror too," I'm like, "Okay, so let's get started then. What kind of horror do you like? Do you like because horror itself is just like the wider reaching term. You've got things like
exactly.
splatterpunk, you've got your supernatural stuff, you've got your psychological horror, you've got your gothic horror.
Yeah, there's a lot. Then you got just the straight up slasher flicks.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So many things. So many things. I like most of it. There are
I'm
like certain like overly gory ones. I'm like, it's just kind of unnecessary and you're getting rid of the scare factor. But yeah.
Yeah, see, I'm very, very similar. I don't mind blood, gore, violence, as long as it serves the story. Like if it's
Yeah,
there to carry the story further, then it's great. I'm kind of the same when it's like a good musical, when you're sitting in a theatre and you're watching a really good musical and the songs carry the story forward.
exactly.
when you're in a musical and you're there, it's like, okay, I'm going to explain that this has happened. And then they sing a song about something you've just had explained to you. It's like, you're not carrying the story forward. This song was unnecessary. This song was
Exactly.
put there so people could get changed in the back.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So it's like, yeah, I don't mind it, but it needs to carry the story for sure.
It does. It needs to serve the plot.
Yeah. And speaking of the plot of our show is mental health.
It is.
So, what are you going to share with us today?
Gosh, I am coming here today to talk to you about things like neurodiversity, particularly dementia. I know dementia doesn't normally fall under the neurodiversity label, but it's effectively a mental health issue with the mind. So I tend to lump everything together because I have bad habits. But yeah, particularly I'm here to talk to you about dementia, particularly dementia representation.
Okay. And you know what? The joy of having your own show is that I can be like, yeah, we're going to talk about it. I don't care what other people says if they say it doesn't fit in the category because it's my show.
I'm totally the boss.
Exactly. It's so great. So first off, tell us what dementia is in case there's anyone listening that hasn't heard of it yet.
Cool. So dementia is something that primarily affects, but not entirely affects, the older population. It is when parts of your brain effectively start trying to think of a really good way to phrase it and then really, really struggling, but it's when parts of your brain effectively shut down before the rest of you does. So imagine if you would, someone's in hospital and they've got something wrong with their liver, they're having liver failure. Dementia's like that, but for your mind instead of like your liver or your kidneys, but it's a very similar kind of thing.
I like that analogy, using the other body parts for it.
Yeah, it's something I try to do a lot when I talk about mental health, because a lot of people have no issue accepting that somebody has an illness when it's like, oh, you've got liver disease. That's cool. Well, it's not cool, but yeah, I can accept that. I can accept the fact that you might need reasonable adjustments at work or in your daily life. But the minute you sit there and say, yeah, I have a mental health issue, it's like, oh, all right, have you tried maybe not having a mental health issue? Have you tried just feeling better?
Have you tried smiling a little bit?
Oh God, yeah. Tried going for a walk.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't believe in taking medicine for mental health issues. Oh my God, I wish people would stop saying that.
Me too. Because on this show we believe do whatever works for you. And if that means medication, then have at her, as long as you're working with a professional doctor.
Of course,
That's my
yeah.
disclaimer.
It's a good disclaimer to have, yes. Self-medication is or self-medicating is maybe not to be advised.
No, that's not what we're promoting.
Not at all.
No. So when somebody is experiencing dementia, what might be happening so that we know kind of the signs to look for?
Cool. So there's so many different kinds of dementia, so they can be really, really varied. The most common and well-known one is things like memory loss, confusion, but that's not how all dementia presents. In particular, the type I know the most about, because I did a hell of a lot of research on it, Lewy bodies, or dementia with Lewy bodies. That one can present with hallucinations, it can present with confusion, it can affect your movement, so how you move your arms and legs. Sometimes you might not be able to be more dexterous, you might lose a lot of dexterity. It can also cause changes in your sleep pattern. You can also suffer from things like fainting spells, falls. They can all be symptoms of dementia. And Alzheimer's apparently presents in a very similar fashion.
Okay. I think that for a lot of us, we get dementia and Alzheimer's kind of intertwined, like they are
Yes.
one and the same, but they are not.
No, Alzheimer's is but a form of dementia. Dementia is the overarching disease, and Alzheimer's is like a subgenre, like we were talking earlier with the horror genre.
Sure.
Yes.
See, horror was important to talk about first because
it all ties in.
Okay, yeah, because I definitely have made that mistake before, because I don't know that much about dementia.
No, I certainly did.
Yeah, exactly. So just kind of using the terms interchangeably. So what when somebody has dementia,
Hmm.
they can then have Alzheimer's as part of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could have dementia, and your dementia could be Alzheimer's, or your dementia could be the Lewy bodies dementia. But you can also get like other things that come into play alongside dementia. For example, again, I'm going to keep talking about this one a lot because, like I said, it's the one I'm the most knowledgeable about. With Lewy bodies, a lot of people get Parkinson's with it, or they'll get Parkinson's first, and then it will become Lewy bodies because it's all caused by a very similar thing. Lewy bodies is when proteins, tiny little protein boys in your brain, they sort of, the best way I can think to explain it is they make like clots, but they're made of protein, and they block the cell's ability to talk to the cells around it. So the cells get sick and die. And that's
Oh.
basically what happens to Parkinson's as well. It's all about the buildup of the proteins. Just
This is
presents very differently.
this is so interesting. I'm learning so much. So I know at the beginning you said typically in the older population, but it can
Yeah,
happen to anyone.
it really can.
Yeah. So what is the typical age of onset?
Typically, the age of onset will be anything after 65. So generally things like this will happen in the general population after the age of 65, but that's when, for want of a better phrase, dementia occurs almost naturally. Dementia can also be triggered by like lifestyle things. There is a thing called alcohol-induced dementia, where somebody who is, say, an alcoholic could end up with dementia because of their alcoholism, and in which case they will probably get it at a much younger age as well. You can get it in like your 50s or something.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
Mm,
Um, and on TikTok, I don't know if you have the answer to this. On TikTok, I have seen this one family whose young daughter
mhm.
um has like a dementia, but they have a certain name for it because she's so young.
Mm.
And I don't remember the name for it, but I'm wondering, do you? And it's okay
I
if you don't.
The only way I've heard it referred to before is just early onset dementia. I've
Okay.
not heard a specific medical terminology, or if there is a type of dementia that specifically targets younger people. I do know it does happen now. I before I worked for our lovely health service, I used to work in the legal profession. I was a legal executive, which on this side of the pond is the same thing as a solicitor,
Okay.
which is the same thing as a lawyer generally. It's the general term. And I used to do a lot of work in private client stuff. So that's like helping people sort out wills, lasting powers of attorney if they ever lost capacity. And the amount of times I had older people coming into the office asking what could they do when their own adult children lost capacity. Sometimes that was through accidents, sometimes it was through things like early onset dementia or another illness. But
Mhm.
yeah, it can properly strike at any age. And again, this is why I'm another advocate for having things like lasting powers of attorney. Like the minute you've got your capacity and you're an actual adult, so like from the age of 18 over here, get yourself a lasting power of attorney.
Yeah.
Everyone should
Age of
have one. It's
18 here too.
Yep, there you go. Get one. Everybody over the age of 18 should have a lasting power of attorney just in case, because you never know what's going to happen.
It's very unfortunate. I mean, we never want to think that those things are going to happen, but
Certainly not.
they do.
This is it. And a lot of like I've gone around giving talks about, well, I say giving talks, nagging the crap out of people to get lasting powers of attorney and whatnot, just in case they lose capacity. And one of the things I've had said back to me quite a lot is dementia doesn't run in my family. It's fine. Nobody in my family's had dementia. And I was like, to start with, doesn't have to run in your family, mate. Second of all, did they? Did they really, or were they just not diagnosed?
And I
Did
think
they?
that is a big part of what we talk about on the show is were they just not diagnosed because a
Mhm.
lot of the older generations
Mm,
haven't been diagnosed with whether it's dementia, depression, OCD, whatever.
mm.
Um, it wasn't as common to go to the doctor,
No,
get the diagnosis.
I always remember being at the one of my desks once upon a time, many years ago, and filling out some paperwork for an older client and asking her to spell her name for me because I am dyslexic. And sometimes I will spell things in my head completely the wrong way. It's literally a joke. It's like a drunk person trying to write your name. So I'm in the habit of asking people to spell their names for me, especially if their name is pronounced different to what I'm used to or
Yes.
whatever. It's not a weird thing to ask somebody, please spell your name for me so I get it right. She went up the wall at me and said that this is because people in my generation are using computers too much. It's made us lazy, so we've forgotten how to spell. And I very politely, I hope, corrected her and said, actually, I'm dyslexic, so I just want to make sure I get this right. Would you mind spelling it for me? And she turned around and said, yeah, dyslexia didn't exist when I was at school. And I'm like, yeah, it did. It
It
really
did.
did.
It
You just,
did. You were just told that you were, and this is going to sound really harsh, but you were just told that you were the stupid kid.
yes,
And
100%.
and I'm picturing like those cartoons where the kid would sit in the corner with that like dunce cap
The
thing
dunce,
on,
yes.
right? And it had nothing to do with your lack of intelligence. It
No,
had to do with the way that the brain was thinking, and it wasn't
yeah,
computing the right way.
this is it exactly. I dread to think what it must have been like so long ago, like even not that long ago, which is truly depressing for people with dyslexia, neurodiversity of any kind, to be sit there and labeled like, yeah, no, no, you're just a bit rubbish. That's all. Off you go. We're done with
Right?
you. And it's
Exactly.
like that's so harsh, man. I,
Yeah,
it's
it
tragic.
really is. I'm picturing the movie what is it, the 500? Is that what it's called? Anyways, with the Spartans and they toss the
Oh,
unfit
yes, yeah.
babies into the pit. Yeah.
Leonidas and the hot
Yes.
gates. 300. You were
300.
close.
There we go. I was like, as I'm saying, I'm like, I know this is not right, but I'm just gonna roll with it because you're gonna get it. So excellent.
He would rather have had 500, I imagine.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. So with dementia,
Mhm.
um, how how long, and this is obviously going to depend on each person or whatever, but generally, how
Mm.
long does it take to get to a severe level?
Well, it is very case by case, and it also depends on the type of dementia you have. It can also depend on whether something happens to you, like say you have a fall. I've seen patients who have been diagnosed with dementia, but they've been managing it really, really well. Then they'll slip and they'll fall and they'll suffer, for example, like a broken wrist. And that will almost put like, I don't know, it's like the dementia drinks a Monster energy drink. It just suddenly goes like, right, here I go then. So if you suffer
Oh,
a trauma, it can really speed things up, which is really unfair, quite frankly.
yeah, that's pretty scary.
It really is. But generally, if you get a diagnosis early enough, so if you're on the lookout for signs and symptoms and you go to your GP and you get yourself a diagnosis and you can manage it via various types of medication, through behavioral changes, lifestyle changes, things like that, there's a whole slew of things you can do. You can slow its progression right down and you can live a fairly active life well into your old age. Whereas if you ignore it and pretend it's not happening, it can hit you much harder and faster.
And I think this is just from my personal experience with older individuals. They don't like to admit it and they want to deny it and pretend like it's not happening, and then they're not doing all of those managing things and it is progressing.
This is almost exactly the situation. When I, again, used to work in the legal profession and I would do wills for people, we'd have the same problem. People would think, no, the minute I get a will, that's it, I'm going to die. I'm like, it's like tempting fate. And so many times people would come in and they would have just had their diagnosis and they'd be like, look, I'm trying to get everything sorted out for my family before my illness gets too severe for me to be able to do like all the legal paperwork, basically.
Yeah.
I'm like, yep, that's great. Let's sit you down. And when we would do things like the lasting powers of attorney, for example, it's not just as simple as get someone in, pop them at the end of the desk, and then you fill out the paperwork. What's your name? What's your address? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You really get to know people. You have long conversations, and every single one of them had two things in common. They were all absolutely terrified, and I don't blame them. And they were all really, really worried about how this was going to affect their family. So my unprofessional suspicion, she says in inverted commas, is that they put off getting a diagnosis because they're worried about what's going to happen. They're worried about what's going to happen to them. They're worried about what's going to happen to their family. They're worried about how they're going to be viewed. Are they just going to be seen as the label the minute they do something silly? Is somebody going to, well, everyone going to jump on and be like, oh, yeah, it's just the dementia. Don't pay any attention. Don't listen to what they have to say. They've got nothing left to contribute. That's it. They just become the disease. And I think that puts a lot of people off.
Yeah.
And I
Definitely.
don't think that's unique to dementia. I think that's true for quite a few things.
I think so. You identify, and actually the person that I interviewed just before you this morning, we were talking about how sometimes it feels like you are identifying with the mental illness that you are instead of just being who you are. And yes, you have this.
Yes.
And it sounds like it's the same for dementia, right? You're still
It
who you
is.
are, but with this illness now.
Exactly. And like we said earlier, there's so much stigma attached to mental health and dementia. So it's almost like you're worried about how society's going to see, like nobody bats an eye. Well, I say nobody bats an eye, that's a terrible way to put it, but nobody bats an eye when you get up one day and you say, okay, right, I have cancer. Nobody judges you, nobody treats you any different. People are compassionate and kind. They should be, otherwise they need a slap. But if you walk into a room and say, okay, I have dementia, people immediately treat you differently. They look at you differently. They don't listen to how you say. They become, in the kindest way, very patronizing. And in the worst way, they just stop engaging with you altogether. And it's really tragic.
It is. So you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I'm just going to ask for a little bit more info. You talked about managing it if you get an early diagnosis, and you kind of said, healthy lifestyle, that kind of thing. What are those healthy lifestyle tips and kind of a few things that people can do?
The best few ones that I've come across in my various wanderings are things like self-compassion is a good lifestyle tip to start. Stop beating yourself up every time you make a mistake, every time you forget something. Try not to panic every time you forget something, because I hope I don't have dementia. I certainly would be surprised if I did. I forget stuff all the time. I put my keys down somewhere and I don't remember where they are, and I'll go and I'll find them in the fridge. And that's weird, but it's just because I had them in my hand when I was looking in the fridge and I just put them down to get something, and then I walked away forgetting my blooming keys.
Totally done it before.
So self-compassion and kindness is probably the top tip. But on a more practical sense, there's dietary changes. Having a really good healthy diet can help. Sadly, cutting down on things like alcohol is always fun. And I say that sadly because I do enjoy a good beer myself. And it would make me very sad if my doctor turned around and said, yeah, Kate, sorry, no more beer for you. I'd probably cry.
But you'd do it.
I would. You can also there's activities that you can do. Like I'm holding up my phone for everyone who's just listening to this, but you can get like brain training apps, things to keep your mind active and engaged. They aren't clinically proven to like stop the disease, but keeping your mind active is always going to be a benefit to things like that.
You don't use it, you lose it.
Effectively, yeah, exactly. But then there's also things about how you manage it in the home. Things like put labels on cupboards, like this cupboard has cups, this cupboard has plates, this cupboard has forks and knives. Again, I'm talking about the Lewy bodies one, but in Lewy bodies, sometimes you won't be able to read certain types of clock face. So change your clocks, get digital clocks, things like that, they make your independence go further, for want of a better phrase.
That's what I was thinking, because you had said, before that trauma can make things more difficult. And if you're getting very frustrated at yourself, obviously that will make it more difficult as well. Yep. So those are great little tips to make your life a little bit easier.
Yeah, stress is bad.
Exactly. So instead of, forcing yourself and saying, I should remember this, give yourself a break. You said it, self-compassion. Give yourself a break and do the things that are going to make your life a little bit easier and a little bit more independent, because I think that's one of the scariest parts of getting older in general, whether it's dementia or something else, your loss of independence.
Yes, yeah. Be it, like you say, dementia or like a physical limitation. Like
Exactly.
losing your independence is very scary for a lot of people.
Hmm.
Like most people, I can't think of anyone who sits there going like, "Yay, I can't wait for the day where I lose my independence."
Right?
That would be a bit strange.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they don't exist, but I struggle.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's all these little steps that help you basically keep your independence and feel like you're still you, like you're still self-sufficient, you're still perfectly capable, because in most instances you will be right up until the later stages of the disease. It's only when things start to go downhill further on that you will need more help.
Hmm.
And even then, it's not necessarily like, right, cool, you got dementia, into a dementia care home for you, bye. There are other types of help that you can have. You can get help from support groups, you can get help from the dementia friendly nurses, you can get help from for example, moving into a supported living facility where you're still independent, you're still in your own home, but there's a
Yes.
warden, somebody there to call for help if like you need help. So there's a various things. It's not, and this is going to sound very, very dramatic, but it's not a death sentence. You don't get dementia and it's like, okay, right, then everything's over. There's still a lot that you can be fine with. I think Terry Pratchett was probably one of the best advocates for living with dementia. I'm not sure if you know him. He's a fantasy author. He wrote the Discworld books and he got dementia and he kept writing right up until when he passed away. And
Oh,
he really demonstrated like, yeah, you get dementia, but you just keep going.
that's
It's not.
that's good.
Mm, yeah, dude was amazing. He
What
wrote some
was his name again?
fantastic books.
What's his name?
Terry Pratchett.
Okay,
Yeah, he
excellent.
did a lot of charity work with a lot of our dementia charities over in the UK. And one of the ones I remember is he was in one of their poster campaigns and he was holding up a sign. And then above the people, because they did this with various people, and they had like, you can still have dementia, and then they'd all be holding up signs that they'd wrote themselves.
Yeah.
And his sign was like, you can still have dementia and write good books like What I Do, and what was spelled WOT.
I
He was
love
a
it.
funny guy.
That's fantastic. And speaking of writing books, what have you written?
I have written a short novella called Man in Winter, in which the main character Arthur has, you guessed it, Lewy body's dementia.
And I'm going to interject here because I have already read this book. Go
Thank you.
and actually read the full review, guys, because I want you to go to my website, or go to what I'm reading on the podcast, go to Spotify, what I'm reading, and go listen to it. I don't want to give away too much because I want you to go there and follow it. But it's a good book, and without giving away everything, I really loved the way that you showed his dementia. You didn't
Mm.
just say he had it, you showed it through his thought process because it was that first person perspective.
Yeah, I like the first person perspective in my writing for exactly that. It's so much easier to show in the first person rather than tell, unless you're like trying to show what somebody else in the room is saying or doing, then you're telling.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a much more personal experience. And I thought for Man in Winter, you needed that personal experience. You
Yeah.
needed to see and feel what Arthur was seeing and feeling.
And I totally did. And I was like,
Yay!
as we got to the end, and don't worry, no spoilers. I never give spoilers, but as we got to the end, I was like, yeah, that's all you get. That's all you get, guys. You have to read it yourself.
I think we had a really well-timed technical glitch then, because you actually cut out.
That's hilarious. Yep. Nope. They
Oh,
don't
it's
get nothing
amazing.
more than that.
No, wall of silence.
Yep.
You have to go
Um,
listen to the
and
review.
so where do they get a copy of this?
You can pick a copy up on Amazon. You can pick it up on, I nearly said Goodreads. The Goodreads sell books, or they just do reviews? I'm terrible with this.
I don't know.
I know you can definitely get it on Amazon, and you can get it in places like, I think, the Barnes and Noble website, if that's still up and running.
I believe so.
Yes.
Excellent. And where do we follow you?
I am on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm I'm on Instagram. I'm basically everywhere. So if you search for Katie Marie Wright, you will find me basically anywhere. And I do have a website, which is, shockingly enough, katiemariewriter.com.
I never would have guessed.
No, it's almost like I was hoping common sense would prevail.
Right?
Sometimes I have common sense. It's amazing.
I do not. Thank you for coming
That was
on
so
the
quick. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you again for coming on the show and sharing with us.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's been really nice. Thank you.
As always, thank you so much for the amazing guests that we have on the show. Be sure to check out their links down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out our merch store. We've got some very cool things on there. That's my favorite. Sorry, I'm busy ending the stigma. But there's some other very cool designs. 10% of the proceeds always goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at RB Media because we have some great new shows coming up and you never want to miss any of those episodes. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye!